Hello and welcome back. I am joined by my lovely co-host Lori. Uh,
Hello.
and, and also here we have combat designer and also my former colleague, Stephen O. How are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Hanging in there. Hanging in there.
Doing
Weird
good.
time, but
Sure, sure. But it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while. So let's just jump right in and get started. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of your path to becoming a combat designer?
Yeah, so my path as coming to a combat designer, it's like I had very humble beginnings. I started off in Albany, New York. That's where I grew up. And my brother is a lot older than me, and he would introduce me to a bunch of comic books and action movies like the Five Deadly Venoms, Kid with the Golden Arms, and one of my favorites, Bruce Leroy and the Last Dragon. And I just wanted to become these kind of characters. So I would start like taking gymnastics and doing kung fu and things like that. It's just to be the character. And when I translated that energy into like making games, I like realized that not just being a game designer, I could also be a person that creates these sort of action figures or adversaries or even the heroes to allow people to feel like that person I was trying to capture and become myself. So um, went to school for it. I went to school at Rochester Institute of Technology. I didn't know anything about programming really before that. I took like one class in high school, and RIT was just starting to have a games program. And I wanted to make sure that I can get into the program. I started talking to, like, I originally went there for IT, knowing that they're going to have this game program. And I lined all my classes to be like a good game designer and have them transfer over because I didn't have a whole lot of money to like stay there extra years. And then along the way, I met a lot of people that had been working in games and had even had an internship where they realized there's a specific role for a combat designer, a person who makes the enemies or a person who works on the hero and their interactions. So that was like my first foray into getting into realizing the role of a combat designer.
You said that you took like martial arts classes to that. So what was like, I guess, what was the process of like taking that experience from that and then like applying it to combat design?
Yeah, so like I grew up in like moving my body and understanding like punches and kicks, right? Being able to throw them yourself. And then you sort of get into the space where you're trying to like read your opponent. They're going to start doing punches and kicks. And as I gotten older, I was like, okay, well, I can't just go out fighting everybody. And somehow like you learn this kind of dialogue with the person that you're like sparring with or fighting with that I've like really just couldn't get enough of, because it's like that movie quote from the Matrix: you don't know somebody until you fight them, or you can really learn them as you fight them. Like you start to anticipate their movements, you make moves that you're trying to train them to do certain things, right? And that's great in real life, but you can't do that all the time. So I started playing fighting games, and back in the day, PlayStation came with a demo of Tekken, and it had the same movements that I had like learned when I was growing up. So I started doing like amateur competitive Tekken matches all the way up into college. And in doing that, I learned like frame data and different things too. So it's a little bit of like learning how my body moved, understanding the mechanics of making a good punch, then being able to read that mechanic in the actual games, like how the characters were throwing punches and the frame data and the speed that it happens, that allowed me to take all that knowledge and translate it into, these are how we're going to make these characters readable. This is how we're going to make this style feel good. And then there's this meta style to it as well of like, okay, well, this is for a person who wants to be a rushdown character or a zoner. This is for the people that like grappling. And you just kind of have your expression. And then as you play your friends, you kind of know their behavior and you're like, okay, he knows that I'm going to do this and I know that he's going to do this. So that's how I counter it. So a little bit of that.
You talked a little bit about it being kind of a dialogue and kind of learning how somebody fought. Like, I'm interested to know, what is your approach? Like, let's just say it's a clean slate. This character's never been done before.
Mm.
What is your approach to coming up with this initial combat design for characters?
Yeah, you really want to come up with like, what's the core fantasy of this character? What is his background? What is their background? Why are they trying to express themselves through violence, right? Like, how are they going to communicate? So somebody who might grow up in an adversarial environment, they might feel more aggressive, or like you have to beat people to the punch. Like the world is so chaotic around me that I have to be more aggressive to get stability. So the first thing I just try to do is like, what is the character's fantasy, and then build that kind of backstory that fits with them. And then I look at gameplay moments that are going to support that. Like I just mentioned, if the person has to be hyper aggressive, then I'm like, okay, maybe their stance is always going to be slightly forward, and they're going to be a more aggressive pose, and they're going to have more dominating moves that like either armored or armored meaning like they absorb a hit while they're giving a hit. Or if I'm going to make somebody who grew up in a little bit more naive or more playful, maybe they're going to be more standoffish back, or like they kind of think that even in the heat of battle, it's like a game, or like it's silly to them. It's like fun. They're going to be more like fluid in sort of their movements and playful in their actions. So you can have like two different fantasies that have these many different play styles that can even go with it. So
Yeah. And another thing too is that you spoke about dialogue. How does combat design relate to other elements of the game, such as narrative?
I often think that like in a fight, you're going to have this natural back and forth of like taking turns. Basically, you're saying things and they're responding to it, right? So there's already this like action and response that comes from just the moveset alone. But you can tell a dialogue through, or a story really, through the environment. How did it change over time? And you don't always have to show damage on a actual character. You can show how things are breaking in the environment. You can show how this person's getting a little bit more desperate during the fight, how there is a reversal or double down. Basically, like you think they're winning, and then they do something and now you're losing, you're on the back foot. So that's just the choreography of the fight, how it can turn into dialogue. But there's also maybe they learned a new ability, maybe something that's unlocked from them, from a core memory. How does that fit into the story? How does this new unlockable mechanic fit thematically to where the character's goals are? And how does their opponent stand in the way of that goal? It's not always good versus evil. It might be my goals versus your goals. You want to, make the world feel all the pain that you felt, or you want to stop the world from feeling pain ever again, and that just puts us at conflict.
Absolutely.
I have another question for you. Are there any types of styles of combat you've really yet to see in a game? And how would you kind of approach that? First of all, what are they? And then also, how would you kind of approach that and want to bring that into a game?
Oh, well, I feel like I've seen a lot of different martial arts, a lot of different styles in games, and I kind of specialize more so in melee combat. There's a lot of different ways to approach combat with magical abilities or gunplay and different things. So I don't know if I can really speak to a style I haven't seen at all, because even capoeira, we're starting to see a bigger resurgence in that, but we haven't seen a whole lot of African martial arts. I don't think there's as popular or is as documented in the world of these different styles of African martial arts. And if I could speak to how to do it, I don't think I would give that away right away. I think that would be something. I think that would be hey, I'm going to do this game that has some African styles. But one might go with this approach where we're thought of life had started in Africa. What if the original African martial art is what it brings in all these other different styles? Basically the style that whether it be Muay Thai, Taekwondo, or Taido, or something like that, evolved from that style, that original martial arts style, and that expressive style. So, how could you make this a interesting origin style that encompasses the different things? So it's oh, you thought you knew this, but I invented it, and I actually didn't share with you all the pieces. You just have a fragment of everything I know.
Yeah. Just like you didn't share all the ideas that you have right now with us. I get it. All right.
That's a freebie. You can try to do that. Go ahead and try. The other idea.
Yeah.
Talk after the call.
I got you.
So I kind of wanted to go back to when you were talking about your taking martial arts and whatnot. What was your favorite martial arts, I guess, inspired piece of media, as in a film or a video game that really inspired you as a combat designer?
Oh yeah, there's several. I mean, even to this day, I love John Wick movies. I love all these other new action films that are coming out. the earliest ones for me would have to be like Kid with the Golden Arms or Five Deadly Venoms. Five Deadly Venoms is sort of like your Avengers before they were Avengers, right? Like we have these five different styles that had these like tropes and things with them, but you start to get the super abilities, the centipede really fast, the snake agile, the toad invulnerable, right? And how do they play together? So that was influential about like how do you come up with different techniques that speak to the theme of the character that you're making, and then how can they be opposed to each other even if they've like learned from the same school. But the other one that was super influential to me, and I feel like it spawned like Dragon Ball Z in a way, is got to be The Last Dragon, right? Like it's a cult classic. Maybe it's not the absolute best movie on the planet, right? But there's so many things about the character progression. Like you're already a master, but it's inside, or you need to break through these own limitations that you have. And the glow is totally going Super Saiyan, and that's like a designer signature that I put in a lot of characters that I worked on. If you know, like a lot of the things that I worked on, they eventually get the glow or go Super Saiyan, right? So those are a couple. I mean, there's so many more. The raid for me, on Bach. I train Muay Thai to this day because of on Bach and things like that. So yeah.
Oh, the raid is intense. It's anxiety. It's fast paced.
Yeah.
So good. Speaking of just the titles you've worked on, you've worked extensively in a lot of different games. Would you mind telling an audience a little bit more about some of those games that you've had the luxury of working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started making games I've been making games for over 10 years now, a bunch of little indie games, Mech Knight Chronicles to working on Project Spark to Fat Princess Adventures. But I think my big break was actually working on God of War 2018. I joined the team at a part of the projects where I had a lot of influence over the encounters, and they really liked what I did, so they brought me back to be working on the grunts or like more basic units. So first I worked on how, with this new camera, how we're going to have these fights be readable and digestible and feel good. And then I worked on how do we make these creatures fit into this world a little better, and mini bosses and bosses. So I worked on Ragnarok and then the DLC Valhalla, where I combined both my encounters knowledge and my character creature making knowledge. And then I wanted to take all the things that I learned by hanging out with Kratos and some of the fantastic people at Sony Santa Monica to work on Black Panther. And that's where we got to hang out a little bit. And I learned so much on that team. But sadly, we can't really talk about it or show it or do anything about that. So now I'm just helping other studios with their projects, some big projects that are unannounced. So I won't be able to talk about them too much, but it's similar to the things that I've learned along the way so far.
Do you have any favorite combat moments among the games you've contributed to?
Oh yeah, there's so many. Let me try to pick one. This is a huge moment for me on God of War 2018. I'm responsible for a lot of deaths in the basically Draugr pit. So that's where the bridge breaks and Atreus falls down, and then Kratos jumps in to jump down. And there are 3 heavy Draugrs that spawn in that fight, and that massacre a lot of people. So in playtest data, we see a heavy drop off of like people struggling with that part. But once you get past that, you're prepared for the rest of the game. Like once you're able to overcome that challenge, you have all the tools that you need to beat the game. So even though it is a frustrating moment for a lot of people, I think it did help a lot of people get into learn to play the actual game instead of relying on like first tier tactics, like early tactics. The other moment on 2018 that I really enjoy is actually right in front of the stonemason fight. There's 3 different superpower Draugrs that come out, and you think that this is kind of the fight. These 3 units on their own can make an interesting encounter. But actually, we bring back an old trope from the previous God of War games where we spawn a large creature. It used to be a Cyclops. For us, it was a ogre. And then we spawn another ogre. So right when you think like you fought this one challenging fight to like now there's an ogre and then there's like two ogres. How am I ever gonna do this? But it's set up in such a way that the pacing of the encounter empowers you to get over it. So you're at first you should feel the threat of it, but as you overcome that fight, you're like, oh yeah, I am awesome. I am the God of War. I totally like can handle all these things. So those two moments, like frustrating moment that turns into like now you have the skills to beat the game, and then I was scared, but it's actually a totally doable fight.
How do you balance that? Because as you know, we've worked on projects together, and sometimes fine-tuning and balancing encounters and combat can prove to be a challenge in and of itself. So kind of what's your approach to just making sure things just feel good?
Yeah. So my approach to like making things feel good is first just like I always tune or start fighting an encounter with the most basic things. Like I always just use basic attacks, and if I'm making a creature or a boss or an encounter, I always should be able to defeat it with just pressing the simple attack button, blocking and dodging, and take 0 damage. That lets me know that the animations are readable, the pacing is correct. Maybe there's if I do get hit, then like okay, I need to like time out, or I need to put a piece of health or something that you can like recharge yourself into the fight. And then the other parts is just like thinking about the fairness and the fatigue that you might have after seeing X amount of units, X amount of heavy fights, X amount of times where you needed to parry or in one particular encounter, and how much time that encounter is going to be. So if you're fighting a boss, maybe that's 4 minutes, and I'm like, all right, well, I need to balance. I have to play this with my very basic defending, punching, and not get hit for 4 minutes straight. That could be really taxing for somebody. So how do I make the character interesting enough in those 4 minutes that somebody's not overstimulated or fatigued by doing all the actions that they have to do? So it's super high level. I'd love to go into more detail about it, but like that's kind of where I start.
No, I appreciate that. No, good.
Yeah. I think something that I'm really curious about too, like when you're doing the balancing, like what is your, I guess, the priority you think about in terms of combat? Because I always think about like when I'm playing a game, do you think more about like the offensive, I guess, or like more of like the defensive or like magical parts, or like I don't know if that makes sense, but like what do you try and prioritize, I guess, when you are starting, like when you're planning that out for combat?
So, it's we were saying dialogue before, but it's really about the dance. Like even if you go back to those movies that I was talking about, they're not really fighting. They're kind of like doing this sequence of dance moves, so they're your dance partner. So how do you make this person interesting? It's not just about defense. If the player's just defending, then that doesn't feel really good. I'm just kind of waiting for my turn, and then I parry, and then I just beat them up or something, right? So what other action verbs can we get? I need to dodge out of the way. Sometimes I need to parry. Is this my opportunity to take my turn back? Can I do this risky thing sometimes? If I do the risky thing sometimes and I win, great. But sometimes I do the risky thing and I get punished. And I was like, I shouldn't have been able to do that. And that needs to be clear. So my priorities start off with, how do we make this dance interesting? Both the player and the combatant have verbs where they can go back and forth with each other. How do I make it readable is the second part. Now that we have those verbs, you need to defend at this time. I need to signal to you that this is the move that you need to get out of the way of. And then this is the move that you need to block, or this is the move that you need to interrupt, right? And then the third part is like, well, how much damage or like how many tries do you get at those attempts? If the player is getting hit once and the game is over, that can be really stressful. But maybe some attacks are more punishing than others. So now that's that signature kind of, and sometimes we call it like the signature kill move, where it's like, I need to watch out for that because it's just going to level me, So, and then you just want to make that like a part of that core kit, that was the one interesting thing that I had to remember. And maybe I have a signature move too that I want to land. I need to be able to cleave him, but which way is he going to dodge? Is he going to left or right? And I feel really good when I pick the right correction, the right side.
Stephen, it is always a pleasure to kind of hear you dive into the nitty gritty of combat design. I've heard it several times, and every single time I feel like I leave learning something new. So thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on my LinkedIn, Stephen Oyarijivbie, and yeah, I'm happy to help you craft battles that everybody can win. And it's always great meeting you guys. Thanks for having me.